Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I know how busy your day is, so really appreciate you investing your time in our webinar, Navigating the End of the POTS Era. We're going to pay you back for that investment with some actionable intelligence and some insights to help you save time, money, and risk in your connectivity network. So I'm Sean Cordner. I'm Chief Marketing Officer of Amplix. Joining me today are leaders from some of the top providers in the managed voice services and aggregation and network infrastructure space. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So I'm going to start off with Glenn from NHC.
Glenn Nelson. I'm one of the founders of NHC. Three of us founded the company. We were former executives from CTC Communications back in 2002. My background is over 40 years in marketing, product development, network design work in telecom, datacom business. Been around for a long time, and NHC's focus very much similar to, I think, the other panelists are. We focus very heavily on making sure that the customer and the partner experience is the best by aggregating lots of services together, by sometimes offering some of those services ourselves and packaging them on one single bill portal, and also providing domestic U.S. NHC employees for service repair, project management, and that kind of support. In our industry, if you look at the three of us that are on here, plus a couple of other ones that are out there across the country, we supply about half of all of the services for the Fortune 500 companies and the Fortune 5,000 below that. Companies come to us because they like that ability to combine lots of services across many states or locations into a single company in which they can call and contact and work with to manage their telecommunications needs.
Awesome. Thanks, Glenn. Glenn, I know you're very shy about representing NHC, so I appreciate you coming out of your shell today. And Michael, from Spectratel, you want to go ahead and give an intro?
Sure. My name is Michael Zadowski. I'm the channel chief for Spectratel. I was thinking through this, what would be impactful for you, the folks here on the webinar today. And I started in this business very much like Glenn, long time ago, selling these actual POTS lines to customers once upon a time. And now at Spectratel, I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of these customers as they go forward with a transformation project in order to optimize their network, optimize their voice solutions for the next decade or two. So Spectratel's been doing this for a long time. And I hope that we are able to bring something to the table that helps you guys get a nugget today on how you go about attacking a problem that's facing all of us right now.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And Ryan from BCM.
Thanks, Sean. This is Ryan Kelly. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at BCM. We're a managed network service provider based in Morristown, New Jersey. Been in business for 31 years. And similar to the other providers here, we design, procure, provision, install various different voice and data services for customers domestically and abroad.
Right. Myself, Ryan, and Michael got three Jersey guys on the call today, so apologize for that to everyone watching. Let's get started. So, Glenn, I'm going to start off with you. I've been in this industry for 26 years, and like Michael had said, I also started off selling POTS lines along with frame relay. For most of that time, there's been discussion about POTS lines going away. Plain old telephone service lines won't be around much longer, is what we kept hearing. But today we're seeing actual changes in the market conditions that indicate that the end may actually be near. Not the least of which is the skyrocketing cost of these POTS lines. So I wonder if you could start off by telling us, in your opinion, what is driving the increase in the tariffed rates of POTS lines, and what else, what is driving the eventual phase out of these lines?
Sean, thanks. So let's start with kind of, for the folks that may not be as familiar, local loops and your home or business phone line, it connected to a central office, and then in turn to an old-fashioned tandem switch to route the calls to other parts of the world. That design, that's from the gas company systems that were designed back in the 19th century. And so these services are very, very old. and there's just no, unfortunately, the loops, the central offices, the tandem switching, all of that's kind of dramatically changed now. And so now what we're looking at is the old-fashioned TDM switching, the copper twisted pairs. They're no longer part of the growth or the planned development of a telephone company. So it's not the basis of providing telephony anymore. So if you look at this, if you look at the carriers that are out there today, like AT&T and Verizon, 80% of their revenue is wireless. It's not based upon these old-fashioned POTS lines anymore. It hasn't been for a very long time. And also universal service, which was a government-implemented regulatory order, made it so that local telephone companies had to supply local phone service no matter where it was, no matter what it cost them, to make sure that literally 99 and 4400s of all households across the country had phone service, and in turn businesses as well. That was removed years ago. And the requirement now, if we read the press and look at what's going on, the requirement now is broadband, universal broadband service, and constantly upping the amount of bandwidth that the government wants service providers to deliver to businesses and residences. And so now there's really no need for the old-fashioned central offices, for the old TDM switching technology. In many cases, even the copper loops. Companies like Verizon are just getting rid of their copper infrastructure and replacing it with fiber because it's far more reliable, and it will be able to support the amount of bandwidth that customers and even regulatory wants to be able to provide to homes and businesses. So those, even the central offices, the real estate of these phone companies is being sold off because they no longer need them. And so, this is what's happening kind of in the marketplace, and what's driving it is no longer a regulatory requirement, not really part of the business model that local exchange carriers really want to offer anymore. And they have to move on to networks that are based upon things like 5G and fiber infrastructure and supporting mobility applications that are not part of this. So this really is very much a dying branch in our telephony business. Now, there could be some places where if you're in Verizon land, for instance, if you're going to convert that POT service to fiber, there may be some additional options for you. But for the most part, phone companies want out of this business, and that's why they're pushing either decommissioning of services, or they're also substantially raising the rates of POT service for the end customer.
I just Googled it real quick, and POTS lines were invented in the 1870s. So, this infrastructure has been around for quite a long time, and I'm sure the cost to maintain and manage that infrastructure, along with, just the lack of flexibility and ability to deliver next generation technologies that really are in demand from enterprises today is a big part of factoring that in. So my understanding is the FCC gave them relief from the tariff rates, and so they're free to charge as much as they want or something like that. So prices are increasing substantially, and it's happening kind of fast. When we were talking before this webinar started, I think Ryan, you had said that you just got a letter from Frontier, and probably so did Spectratel and BCN. So maybe you could just kind of relay, just so people understand, how acute this problem is, what was in that letter.
Glenn, you want to take that? I think you brought that up.
Yeah, sure. I think that, again, not to name individual cases, but Sean, you did name the name there. So all of us are wholesale buyers on this panel of local phone services across the country. And we just got one, everyone did, for customers in Connecticut and certain parts of the United States from Frontier. And they're just basically, this is their 5th rate increase in the last 2 years. And they're basically raising services every 6 months to our customers. And that's probably, I want to say, maybe 150% since they started this process 3 years ago. And now it's substantial. So the rates that we're anticipating in Connecticut will be pushing $140 a POTS line. effective July 1. So we don't even have a lot of notice to work with our customers to kind of get, additional options out there. But this is what's happening. And our job, and I'll say again, from a channel perspective, not just NHC, our job is to basically give the end customer, and it's also obviously Amplex working with those end customers as well, to give the end customer the options that we're going to talk about this afternoon as ways of substantially saving money and really providing a lot more reliability for your POTS type applications, and kind of migrate off of those old-fashioned POTS services because it's really getting to the crazy level, depending upon where you are in the United States in terms of where these costs are going.
I
Thanks for
think
that.
that's a key. That's a key. Just to add on to that, it really varies based on the regions too. We mentioned one provider. You go out to the mountain states. You may not be able to order new POTS lines after the summer. Other providers are just raising rates exponentially. So it really comes down to pricing and availability. That's really driving all this.
Hey, Ryan, I want to ask you too, the uncertainty that comes along with, short notice and just the ability for this underlying pricing to change and the uncertainty just in general macroeconomic conditions right now, and enterprises are looking to, reduce OpEx and preserve capital. So maybe you just kind of speak about what are the impacts that businesses can expect from these changes, the rate increases, and if they transition off POTS, functionality, and what's the gravity of a transformation project of this magnitude? What kind of impact is it having?
Well, there's a lot of impacts, right? When you talk about the financial part of it, it's impossible to manage a budget effectively. Some of these rate increases we've seen, within a 30-day notice, they'll go up 10 to 15x. So we had a customer last year that on a 40 POTS lines had a $47,000 rate increase, and they're kind of forced to make these decisions, which isn't always the wisest thing. But managing budgets is a challenge. We're seeing operational savings from retiring legacy POTS lines, anywhere from 20 to 60%. The cost of maintaining this equipment is getting more expensive, and it's happening more frequently. So that's a cost. And it's really just the burden of, paying more money, for less reliability and functionality. And when you talk about functionality, I think Glenn mentioned it earlier, these services, you get a significant enhancement to capabilities. You have the ability to monitor these services. They're all managed on a central platform. We have the ability to do analytics and alerts and reporting, things that just aren't done on standalone POTS lines. And from a reliability perspective, this all comes with redundant, battery supplies, and you can have multiple internet connections. So you're getting, significant uplift in reliability from this as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ryan. Michael, from one old telecom guy to another, back in the day, you could guarantee that a company would have at least a couple of POTS lines at each location for alarms or elevators or, other mission critical applications, and faxing being another one. So, what can you tell me about the most common misconceptions that businesses may still have about replacing POTS lines with newer technology?
I think one of the things that catches a lot of customers today is they think they have time, right? There's about 20,000, 25 or 20 million, 25 million, 18 million, something like that, POTS lines still out there in the United States, and that it varies greatly. And they're not all necessary, Sean, to your point, only, maybe 40, 50%, some lower number of that are for mission critical life safety type lines like alarms, elevators, etc. But at that number, 8 million lines or something like that, we would, as a collective group on this panel and our counterparts out there in the world, we're talking about thousands of lines that have to be converted daily, right? And a lot of companies no longer have a telecom manager or something like that we used to speak to in the 1879 or whenever the POTS lines were developed, right? Certainly in the 1990s, I was looking for telecom folks. They are now IT folks, right? And so it's hard to get a good a good inventory of what you have, right? And so figuring that out, getting all of those different bills together, and then working with a partner such as yourself in order to start the process of, like Ryan said, optimizing some of those POTS lines are not necessary, making sure identify the life safety critical lines and what technology is going to be the best fit for replacing those particular lines. There's a lot of options out there that you can pull from the portfolio of POTS transformation, but in order to do it correctly, you have to kind of understand what that inventory is, and time is unfortunately not your friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk just briefly about what are the alternative solutions here to POTS lines. So we kind of set up the problem, right? There's uncertainty in costs. It's going to make it difficult to budget. There's constraints around the technology itself. So let's say someone on this call is interested in getting off of their POTS lines and kind of stabilizing their budget, potentially saving money right away, and increasing their capabilities. What type of solutions would they have at their disposal to replace these POTS lines?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it does vary. One of the things I'm proudest about working at SpectraTel is we offer a multiple product solution to these types of problems for customers out there. And as I mentioned, as 20 million POTS lines out there, you might not all need them. So one option is some of those can just be let go and optimize the network somehow that way by not converting everything that's there, because there's probably a POTS line in an office that was ordered in 1980 that's just sitting there and somebody's been paying a bill for. But from a replacement perspective, on the ones that are necessary, faxing works really well over POTS over broadband, right? That's a product supplied by the cable companies. It works really well for that. Long faxes that go into pharmacies, hospitals, that's a great product for consideration there. A lot of customers moved from POTS lines to hosted and SIP type platforms. When COVID started happening, there was a big influx of that. And for voice lines, etc., that might be a great option there. There are multiple POTS in a POTS over a box type solutions out there as well. And as Ryan mentioned, a lot of that technology comes with fire department certifications, etc. It comes with battery backups in order to do that. It comes with dual connectivity options where it's broadband or potentially multiple SIMs or multi-carrier SIMs in order to best perform there. So you really need to reach out to a trusted advisor such as yourself to understand what your inventory has today, and then select the best solutions based on what you're trying to optimize in your own portfolio.
Glenn, I understand that it's highly dependent on the use case and the particular circumstances, as Michael had kind of alluded to there. But what are the key factors that a business should take into account when they're choosing what technology is right for them to replace POTS lines?
Sure. So let's just quickly review what Michael had said and Ryan had added to. So the options really are, you could move to a VoIP product, particularly, and again, for me, the decision they're moving to a VoIP product would be if the customer already has broadband connectivity, then adding some VoIP service for that could be quite advantageous. One that was not mentioned that I'd certainly strongly mention is cable POTS. So we offer a lot of that. I know these other two guys do as well. The cable companies actually are the largest voice providers in the United States. They're much bigger on the, home residential phone lines and business lines as well for traditional POTS type services that are now on cable, much more than the old-fashioned, the old LECs. So cable POTS, and also cable POTS has backup capability, which is kind of cool as well. Wireless POTS And then, like I said, in some cases, the customer may want to stay if they're in, for instance, Verizon land footprint where they're going to go to fiber. You're going to have about a 90% improvement in the reliability on that fiber service. So, and there's no plan to remove that type of functionality that at least Verizon's telling the industry. So those are your options. Now, what are the characteristics to add to your question? VoIP really is dependent upon the specific application, if you need backup or not, and also if you already have broadband. If you don't have broadband, VoIP service, for 1 or 2 POTS lines, which is really what we're talking about here a lot, it's not very economical. Cable POTS is very economical. It's dependent upon where it's available. Not all cable companies offer cable POTS for businesses. Not all locations are compatible. But if they are, the service goes in very easy, and you could put in as little as 1 line very economically, and there's no charge for that broadband connection for that service. It's included in the POTS line. And then wireless POTS, as was mentioned earlier, going gangbusters. There's some variables there in terms of making sure that you have a signal and those sorts of things. I think it gets a bit kludgy if you have a lot of old-fashioned voice lines you're replacing. But let's face it, folks, a lot of that 15 or 20 million that's left over are really locations that are either very small, 1, 2, 3 line remote location, or they are used for alarm lines or monitoring services, which can be replaced with the right kind of certified service if it's like an elevator line or those sorts of things. And so each one of these options depends upon where you are. Are you in the right spot to basically have POTS lines forever if you want them? Are you going to be in a place where it's going to be decommissioned? Do you have existing broadband connectivity, which opens up more options? Could we get you cable POTS? In the wireless POTS world, are you in the middle of the woods and it's going to be damn hard to get a signal to work right? Those are all factors that we all have to take into account when we're giving this process over, giving the options over to a customer.
Quick
And Sean,
follow-up
I think if I could add on to that, I think the big factor really is what are the lines being used for? And that could really help dictate the best solution possible.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I quick follow-up to that question. Anyone can take it, but so a common use case that I remember seeing would be, let's say, a retail operation where they would have broadband as kind of their primary, but they have POTS lines in case, let's say there's a fiber cut and that broadband goes down, and so that copper network was a separate and distinct network most of the time, separate and distinct access, right? So if you're getting POTS over broadband, for example, how do you ensure that you do have that continuity and that redundancy? I'm going to pick on you, Glenn, because you were talking last. Actually,
yeah, I think so. Cable POTS has battery backup capability. The cable providers offer the same kind of certification stuff that the folks that you'll see from the wireless POTS providers, of which we all are. We offer the same sort of thing. I would only be concerned in the VoIP world where not all VoIP providers have that kind of backup capability. And it is definitely what's available and what is the specific application for the customer.
But what if the problem is in the network? I think what I'm fishing for here is, there's a solution where if broadband at your location is the primary means of communicating to the outside world, a 5G backup, for example, would be a good option. So there are ways, if you're using POTS lines in your network infrastructure today, to ensure that there's redundancy and emergency calling capabilities should there be a network outage. There are ways to create that redundancy today, correct?
Yeah.
So Sean, I think it happens the opposite more often, right?
Mm.
People, because the POTS network is completely different than the network infrastructure that might have a point of sale and other type of critical information on it. A lot of customers, I'm sure we all run into this, right? They don't want a POTS replacement product that is touching that network that they utilize today, right? So the safety concerns are typically the opposite of that. I want something succinctly different from what my network point of sale corporate data happens to be riding over. And in some cases, customer would install maybe a separate cable line cable broadband line to run a box type solution, but more often than not, they're using a box solution instead of POTS over broadband with some sort of dual connectivity SIM, multi-carrier SIM, something like that, in order to have it completely separated from their corporate network. It's typically the opposite, right? They want it to not touch versus be integrated within.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as they have that failover capability, right? To keep
100%.
that point.
Yeah, and that's why the VoIP option is really, at this stage, that's not really the reason the customer goes to, UCaaS or a VoIP platform. They're going to be looking at the other options. They're going to be looking at cable POTS and wireless POTS as being the principal solutions to migrate any kind of mission critical POTS service.
Mm-hmm.
So Ryan, anytime there's a technology transformation project, it introduces risk inherently into the client's network, or it creates a risk of disruption to business. So I wanted to ask you, how do businesses transform their POTS lines to alternative solutions, without compromising on safety, security, and mission critical operations? How do they ensure that there's not disruption throughout this migration process?
Well, that's a great question. It really takes proper coordination and planning. This does take time. You have customers that make frantic decisions sometimes because these prices are escalating. But you really, I think it was mentioned earlier, we really need to understand, the inventory that we're looking to replace. What are these POTS lines being utilized for? Do you need all these POTS lines? Can you take this as an opportunity to do some cleanup? Or from there, you need to, prioritize based on, what criteria is important to the customer. It could be based on location. It could be based on cost. It could be based on service issues. One of the things I don't think that we brought up, especially in this mission critical applications, is when a POTS line goes down today, sometimes it could be down for an extended period of time and it can't be utilized. Where these newer services, we have the built-in backup and redundancy, so you're eliminating that. But so you need to prioritize that. And there's coordination with other stakeholders, because it could affect other parts of the enterprise. So whether it be your IT department, facilities, operations, or security as well. And ultimately, I think you need to do everything you can to mitigate any type of risk. Test mission critical applications, test for compliance, right? You want to make sure you don't risk failure in those areas. And, poor planning, it really just turns into major issues in the long run.
Yeah, it sounds like you need to really take a pragmatic and maybe layered approach to doing this, right? Build your proof of concept, do this in stages. Don't try to flip the switch all at one time and hope for the best. And I think everyone on this call, myself included, would advocate for partnering with someone to help guide and steward that process to ensure that we mitigate risk as much as possible. I'm going to get to the question and answer section later, but there is a question I think this is a good time to ask it. And that was, what are the installation times for POTS replacement products?
They do vary. A lot of that is dictated by the customer's inventory and what they know about it, right? So it can be done quickly, right? In the case of Ryan had mentioned that, a POTS line can be down, and it can be down for days, weeks, months, or whatever. The customer doesn't even know about it. So there are situations that you can do it, relatively quickly within a week or something like that. But a project, to Ryan's point, takes time, and the installation of doing POTS lines across multiple locations, as we all kind of specialized in, there is different alarm company panels out there. There's different elevator panel boxes, etc. And each one of those has to be tested to work with different nuances with different pieces of equipment, etc. So acting fast, as Ryan had mentioned, is not necessarily the wise way to do it. I would encourage the folks out there to take a more nuanced and pragmatic approach to designing a process with a partner and with a supplier that has expertise in this across the board, so they can get an optimized solution to best fit their needs for today and into the future.
Glenn, if someone did take a do-it-yourself approach to this, I think we touched on, some of the risks and maybe what the approach might be. But do you want to touch on, are
Yeah.
there any broad strategies that you would recommend to somebody that wanted to do it themselves to ensure a smooth transition?
My recommendation would be not to do it yourself. I think if we look at what we've kind of been talking about this afternoon, um, again, the transition from being more telecom manager that reported to perhaps the finance group and can analyze bills and have the time to look at all this stuff. Now it's part of the IT organization, and it's very heavily overworked. So you don't really. We're just doing one right now. It's a 100 location customer, and it's a perfect example of everything that we're talking about this afternoon. There's just no way that customer, they would have to peel out a couple of people to work full time to find, okay, here's a location. This is what I can put in. How are we going to order that? How are we going to manage the billing for that single location? And by the way, we got 99 more to go. Okay. And then we got to manage the ordering process. We got to manage the installation, make sure somebody's going to be there, make sure that, all the other tricky things that Michael had pointed out. Have you coordinated with that individual alarm company? There's so many moving parts to doing this the right way that you really want to use an organization like ours and like these folks, because we have those skill sets. We have the project management teams, and we understand what the nuances are to making sure this process goes as easily as possible. And that's the other thing I want to say. It seems like a lot of times, despite the fact that the pricing gets to almost ridiculous levels, one of the reasons that the customer doesn't want to do it is that they think that they have to be far more involved in that process than they probably need to be. The beauty of most of this technology, the beauty of most of the applications here is that this is not a voice line used for business. So you don't have the porting process. So you don't have trying to set up port dates and coordinating with a phone vendor and all the other kind of stuff. So you can actually put this service in while the other service is up and running, and then our technicians can do a cold swap very easily. So a lot of this is can be managed the right way. But when you add lots of locations, you're adding lots of complexity to it. So we always say, if you want that single bill, you want one number to call, perhaps you have, like, I think all three of us offer these things. We have monitoring. So if we're going to go to a broadband solution for this thing, we're monitoring that line in advance. If something happens to it, we're going to tell you that it's not working right, and we're already working the underlying tickets for it. Those kinds of things you're not going to get from a POTS line. You just simply can't get it. So it's a combination of project managing the process, understanding the nuances of what has to be done, coming up with the best solution, one of those 5 we've talked about, and then giving them a single organization in which they can work with, in which they can look at their billing, in which they can look at their service issues, all under one rooftop. That's the advantage that all 3 of us offer.
Yeah. Yeah, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to try to do it yourself. It's so time consuming and so fraught with risk if you don't really understand what you're doing. I just reading a CSR or customer service record itself is a skill set that's a dying skill set. The people that know how to do it probably work for companies like yourselves. So that would be a challenge to try to do on your own. So, let's say that the group that's watching this gets the message and they understand that now's the time to initiate this type of transformation, whether it's because they need to stabilize budget or find cost savings, or whether it's because of something more strategic like expanding capabilities with technology. And let's say they get the message that this is something they shouldn't try to tackle themselves. Michael, what would you say are some immediate actionable steps that they could take today in order to start to prepare for this transition? And obviously after they start to engage with Amplix, so that we can help guide them.
Sure. Know what your inventory is, right? So that's probably a collection of multiple bills from multiple carriers, multiple locations, all that kind of stuff, right? If you don't have the inventory today, that's probably the first step as to getting it together. It's never perfect. I'll tell you that, these projects change as you go through them. Then they should probably call you, Sean. They should probably call Amplix, right? And find a good partner out there that's a trusted advisor that they can work with but you need certain things, right? You need an inventory so that you can start determining what types of lines that you have. You need to know where the locations are. As Glenn just mentioned, 100 locations. You know, you can't have one guy running around to 100 locations nationwide, right? We have teams of technicians that go and help the customers through transformation projects like this. And then, you know, at the beginning, you're optimizing that, right? So you're trying to understand what we have today, how much of it do we actually need in the transformation phase? And then the plan could look something like, hey, I'm getting killed in this particular region of the country from a cost perspective. We want to prioritize phase one to do this. Phase two might be, oh, we've got decommissioning notices for this particular carrier in this particular part. We need to swap phase one and phase two and prioritize on this, right? So the experts that are on this call today will all help you work through the nuances of that project management and get you to the point where you have an optimized, transformed network of the future. Once it's in, it works flawlessly. As Ryan and Glenn mentioned, we all can monitor that particular network and provide analytics around it. But it is something that we're going to need to do for you, for the customers that are out there today. And you start from the very beginning. What do you have? Who do you partner with? And then selecting the right technology to optimize that solution.
And what priorities do you have?
Yeah. And the priorities, like I said, they sometimes change as you go through it. But we're all accustomed to that, right? We all understand that that's the way business works.
Yeah, and
the priority is not, I'm sorry to interrupt, but not all providers are the same as far as the underlying LECs or POTS line territories. So some are a little bit more stable from a pricing perspective and an availability perspective than others. So understanding that landscape is really going to help with the planning and understanding what steps you should take.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to say that, you know, Amplix can help with all of this process. So that's something that we can do for our clients, is help them, you know, sign an LOA, help them pull the CSRs, get a good understanding of the inventory. We can then actually build that baseline of inventory in our proprietary portal to help them kind of manage on an ongoing basis what they've got. And as technology transformation happens, we can keep that updated in our platform. So that's enough of a commercial for us. I do have some Q&A, but before I get into that, you know, Ryan, Glenn, Michael, anything that you want to add before we get into some tactical questions?
Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing, which I think was brought up by a couple of the guys earlier, just to kind of bring the point home. Yes, we do have this rate increase that's come from a carrier, but we also have these crazy rate increases that happen. And these crazy rate increases are cases where that customer location we may get a bill where we were billing that customer even for a PRI type service or a TDM type service or a POTS line, and we were billing them whatever it was, $50 a month. And suddenly they say, you're going to owe us, if you don't move this in 60 days, the price will be $15,000 a month. And you say, this is a joke, right? And this hit us from another underlying carrier, all three of us in the wintertime. And the reason for that was they were leasing services from another company who was basically getting out of that business. And that company then had gotten so tired of trying to get the other carrier to leave that marketplace because they were shutting down their central offices, that they threw these ridiculous rates up. And believe me, they were going to charge those rates. There was going to be any changes to them. And so that's the other factor that happens, you know, why you need to consider this. Yes, there could be continuous escalation, but there also could be just crazy price hits that suddenly happen. And they're beyond our control. All three of us, it's beyond our control in terms of what happens.
Yes, it's interesting that something that's been in the ground for as many years as these POTS lines have is creating such a dynamic environment right now. But that's great advice to point that out. So
on one other comment, as you look for the questions, right? There's also compliancy issues, right? So in some cases, the POTS line gets converted to a POTS over fiber, but that might not necessarily be compliant in New York City, New York State, or whatever to meet the backup redundancy requirements for fire alarms, etc. So just because the line has been converted, it might not be compliant. We had one particular customer that was getting fined every single day while they were doing this. They thought it was fine. It's not. So just do your research, engage experts, make sure that you get a solution that works for your company. You don't want a safety concern out there.
Appreciate that. That's great advice. All right. So the first question I'm going to ask, I'm going to read it as is, but I think there's a way to answer this in a more general way. So that is, what do you see happening to POTS lines that fall under the Commonwealth of Massachusetts contract? So I guess the broader way to ask this is, do state contracts have any more protections over price increases than not purchasing through state contracts?
I'm probably, are you guys on that? I don't think you guys are on. I'm probably the only one that's on the state contract. So I can answer that question. There is some brief ability to stabilize the pricing, but we get regular intervals throughout the year where we can reintroduce pricing changes based upon what's happening in the environment. So I would say you might get a little bit of a break, but not in the, not for a year. You're going to get it. So that's kind of how that process works with the state. We have to submit new price changes on a couple times a year, in which gives us an opportunity to cover our costs. And so yeah, that would be my answer to that one. Good question though.
Yeah.
Good question, and that's the right answer, right? But the other part of that is the reliability of the services that are being put out there. As Glenn had mentioned at the very beginning, those services are getting antiquated and not as reliable as they once were. So you have that risk factor as well.
Yeah. And I think the big takeaway from this is there are huge vested interests and lots of money behind the movement to get people off of POTS lines. And you may get some respite from that, but you're not going to hide from it. That's for sure. Let's see. We had some other questions. When mentioning cable POTS, does this include Comcast VoIP? Do cable POTS support elevators?
So
I believe they do, unless
Yep.
they do. They have the battery backup service, and we have not had any trouble installing that type of service for that application.
Yep. Agreed.
Got it.
Agreed.
What if the network goes down? Say on cable POTS, the cable circuit fails.
So the cable network is designed that the voice portion of it is somewhat segmented from the data portion of it, but there is still a single provider and there's a single point of failure that has the capability to take it down, right? And so in some cases, you can use the box that's out there with some sort of a cellular backup to give you a secondary way to do it. I actually had a cable security system in my house at one point in time that had a cellular box that sat outside. So yeah, there is a way to protect against it, but there could potentially be, without a separate connectivity option, a single point of failure.
Got it. I mean, you can get as much redundancy as you're willing to pay for, right? So
Exactly.
that's
Exactly it.
Okay, so this is an interesting question. And he asked a follow-up question. What are the possible uses of the old cable plant, the copper that's out there besides recycling? And are there any use cases in the IoT realm? Which I would assume maybe, there's maybe a less, depending on what you're using the IoT for, maybe less need for reliability there, less concern.
I would say though that where the phone companies, where the local exchange carriers, the LECs, where they see kind of an opportunity for them is there's at one point 19,000 central offices. You just don't need that many central offices anymore. So one of the things that a lot of these carriers are pitching would be that because they have battery backup, they are specially built, many of them have fire suppression already built in, the floors are super reinforced. These are really a great area for edge type computing applications. So where you want that, you want to move from the huge data center to something far closer to the customers and network applications. This is kind of where they see that's what's going to happen with some of that real estate, because people really aren't going to buy them for their homes. These buildings were specifically made to operate for the use of a central office. So I think there's going to be an opportunity there with the edge computing world. On the copper side, copper is worth more right now than it ever has been. It's extremely valuable to the point where, and again, I'm sure all of us had this, like we had it in California, where people were, we were having customers call in to complain they've got no service because literally thieves had stolen the copper. They'd cut like a section of 60 feet between telephone poles and just walk away with it and get hundreds of dollars worth of copper scrap from that. So there's a lot of money to be made in probably recycling that infrastructure. And that's kind of where I see it going. You can get extremely fast bandwidth on very short copper legs. And AT&T played with this for years with a couple of their products. They bring fiber into a slick, into a neighborhood, and then use the existing copper to provide, very high speed. And that still is a possibility. But in terms of the long run, every 5G antenna you see for a service provider is 3 to 4 times more fiber infrastructure necessary to run that than the old 4G. So the world is not going in that direction. The world is going in the direction of wireless, whether it's LEO or whether it's 5G and lower Earth orbiting satellite, or 5G and fiber. That's kind of where the world is going.
Edge computing is a big deal for those things out there, machine learning, AI ops platforms, those things are, to Glenn's point, that's what that real estate is going to be valuable. Getting the computing power closer to the location is really what's going to drive where that real estate goes. And that copper is more valuable elsewhere, 100%.
All right, I'm just going to ask if there's any other questions. No? All right, well, I think we can start to wrap this up so I can get out there and rip some copper out of the ground and
That's it.
prepare for my
College
retirement.
savings plan.
So listen, guys, I really appreciate your time and expertise here. And to anyone that's still listening out there, just want to say if this is a project that is relevant and salient to you, you can reach out to Amplix. I believe we've got marketing@amplix.com. You can reach out to sc@amplix.com. That's my email address. I can put you in touch with any of these gentlemen or a consultant that can help you get started on an engagement like this. And got a nice little note. You guys clarified some things for me. Someone's going to be reaching out in the future. Appreciate that. So with that, I guess we'll give you one last chance to drop any insight or knowledge before we go.
I'll just say that anybody listening, and we hope you enjoyed the session. I certainly appreciate being part of it. But remember this, we don't sell directly to end users. We sell through Amplex. So if you have questions about, any of us, I think on the panel, it's through Sean's organization that we work with. We don't have a direct sales force.
Appreciate that. I will also say that SpectraTel and BCN also have hats in case anyone that factors in.
We do have hats. Sean, I would say, for anybody that's out there, to Glenn's point, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for having us. We've enjoyed our time, but the time is now to kind of get ahead of the curve. I think where it's going to become hectic sometime in the future is if you postpone this project, it could become more urgent later, which speed doesn't necessarily mean a better outcome at the end of it. And it gives you the ability now to do some planning appropriately through your organization optimization, etc. And it doesn't have to be as hard as you think it might be. Hundreds of locations, a couple of lines at each location. We're all experts in organizing that information on your behalf. And so if you think you don't have the resources to do it, it's okay, right? We can all help you with the organization of those resources, utilizing the project management and the skills that we all possess to help you get to that finish line without really killing what you're doing in your IT space today.
Appreciate that. Ryan, you want to leave us with any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would add this. I would add the same. Thank you very much. Hopefully everybody got, some knowledge out of this and take some action. The days are coming soon. We did mention some examples of, crazy rate increases. I think the three organizations here, although we're not, we can't avoid any of these rate increases. Many of those large rate increases are with the providers directly that we were explaining. So it is an opportunity to look at BCN, Spectratel, NHC. If you do have that, you could look to try to stabilize pricing, maybe reduce some costs and plan for this change. Because again, the message is it's going to happen. It's happening sooner than everybody realizes. And it really takes the proper planning and commitment to get this done to make sure it's a successful migration. So the three of us are here to help in any way possible. And thank you to the Amplix team for hosting us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we did get one extra question come in that I think is worth responding to, and a comment. The comment was sometimes the local provider doesn't actually have accurate information on the CSR, so it requires a little bit of follow-up and testing. But the question was, is there an extra fee for that part of the service, meaning the aggregation of, the detail, the billing, and, testing which lines are still active? Is that a professional service, or is that just matter?
From the Spectratel perspective, and I think we're all the same, right? So I'll talk in generalities, right? There's a standardized scope of work that we kind of expect going into a situation like this, and I think we all kind of have standardized that process across the initials. But there are clients out there that don't know what they have and need additional professional services out there, and I think we can all help accommodate that type of additional due diligence for a one-time fee versus an MRC type fee, right? So there's definitely ways to attack the problem to help a customer such as that optimize that in the long run.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My experience has been that a big chunk of that comes with the service.
Yep.
You really have to go kind of outside of standard parameters before you're going to have to make that a project. So it's a great
sometimes the one-time fee is worth it, right? Because if you can eliminate 4 lines that you don't need at that location anymore, your ROI for that is in a month or 2 months or however long it happens to be. So it's still worth it, right? But I think we've all standardized that somewhat internally.
Not to mention the cost of the resources that you would have, your internal people dedicated to doing that part of the project.
Yeah.
Definitely. So awesome. Thank you guys. Appreciate that. And really excited for people to have the opportunity to engage with you guys and start saving some money and increasing their capabilities and putting an end to the POTS era once and for all. So thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.